Drills and impact drivers, their differences, and their applications. We'll start with the drill. A drill can do pretty much everything that you would want it to do, whereas an impact driver has a few specialty things that we use it for that make it a little bit easier to use in specific applications. A drill has many settings. It has a torque setting, a high speed and a low speed, forward and reverse, and a trigger. Whereas impact driver really only has the trigger and the forward and the reverse. The torque settings are adjusted by adjusting the clutch at the top of the drill. This drill has a clutch setting of 15 all the way down to 1, and then there's one that looks like a drill bit, which gives it all the possible torque. The other main difference between a drill and an impact driver is the type of chuck or mouth that it has. The drill has what we call a keyless chuck, which has 3 teeth that come in that clamp onto your drill bit. When you use your hand to open and close it, you can simply spin the outside and you'll see that the teeth are opening up when you spin it one direction, and then closing down when you're spinning it the other direction. In order to attach a drill bit to it, you open it up, slide it in, and then you need to crank it down to tighten it all the way. You want to make sure that the bit is in completely straight. With smaller drill bits in particular, it can be off-center, which could be dangerous. Moving on to the next part of it, we have the forward and reverse switch. On one side here, there's an arrow pointing forward, and on the other side, it's pointing backward, and that's, you push it all the way through, and that's how you change the directions on your drill. On the top of the drill, we have 2 speed settings, a 1 and a 2. That is about how, the 1 will spin much slower versus the 2, which will spin much faster. Sometimes the drill can get stuck in between the 2 settings, not giving you any power at all, so that's something to be aware of. Some of the newer drills also have lights built into them. They turn on automatically when you pull the trigger and then turn off after a short delay. If you notice that your drill is slowing down, the battery is probably dying. Simply remove the battery by pushing the button down, pulling it forward, bringing it over to one of our charging stations, and slipping it down. Make sure that you're always charging the batteries that have started to run out of power so that next people that come to the charging stations have a fully charged battery that they can use. Next, we'll be talking about the impact driver. The impact driver is a specialty tool that we use quite a lot in the theater. It allows you to put in screws easier, and it also allows you to put in nuts and bolts or lags into the stage floor, which is very useful. The reason for the impact driver having a bit more strength in it is that there is a hammering action that takes place once it reaches a certain amount of torque. It spins freely at first, but once there's enough resistance, the drill changes and actually hammers, and that takes a lot of strain off people's wrists and allows it to have a lot more power in order to put things into pieces of material. The other large difference between the impact driver and the drill is that you have to have a specialty bit to go into it. You have to have bits that have very specifically this size and this little nub in it here. In order to put these bits in, you have to pull forward this collar, slide it in, let it lock back, and then you've got your bit in place. You'll notice that we'll have that on this, which is a socket adapter, and this is a socket, and then as well as on this style here for a magnetic tip for putting in screws. Here's an example of 2 drill bits. One of them is relatively new, while the other one was used and abused. You can tell that it would be much more difficult to put in a screw with this older drill bit. Next, we're going to be talking about putting screws into pieces of wood. It is really important to remember, whether you're using a drill or impact driver, that all your force is pushing straight from the back of the impact driver or drill through the drill bit into the screw, all in a straight line. If you have any sort of an angle, it's likely that it'll slip off the top of the screw. It is also really important to note that if you have a magnetic tip, that makes it a lot easier to sink screws in, because when you have a magnetic tip, the screw will actually stay in place for you. It's amazing how much of a difference that'll make when you tip your screw gun over and it doesn't fall off your tip. As well as there's some magnetic tips that actually have sleeves on them as well. These sleeves help keep the screw on even better for people who are inexperienced with putting in screws. So I'm going to start off by putting a screw in this piece of wood. I'm going to be putting the tip down, starting slowly just to have it grab a little bit, and then putting force down. Most people are surprised about how much force you really need to put in a screw. You really want to lean most of your weight into it if you can. Body position can often make a big difference on how successful you are at putting screws in. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger slowly at first, making sure it's grabbing, and then pushing hard. You notice that sound, that was the hammering sound that comes in after it reaches a certain level of torque. If I were to do the same thing with a drill, you'll notice that I won't have that noise. Start off slow, just the same way. Make sure I'm pushing all the way down. So that's putting in screws. Now we're going to be looking at drilling holes into pieces of wood. There are specialty drill bits that can be put in the impact driver, but mostly we'll be using the drill to drill holes into wood or metal. Again, I'm changing the bits out, switching over here, tightening it down. It's always best to have your piece of wood clamped down if you can. This keeps it stable and will keep it from spinning on you, especially if it's small. And there you go. One of the great uses for the impact driver that I would not recommend using the drill for as much is putting in bolts. When you're attaching a bolt, usually you'll use a ratchet or a wrench on it. Using an impact driver can speed that process up considerably. A note on putting in bolts: whenever you put in a bolt, you'll always want to have 2 washers at minimum. One washer that's directly to the head of the bolt, and then the next washer will be on the other side directly against the nut. There are situations where you'll also want to add a lock washer. Lock washers are really helpful in situations where there's a lot of movement, such as on wagons. They'll keep tension on the nut and will keep it from rattling off during a performance. And those are the basics about drills and impact drivers and some of their applications.